welcome to 70 Years, 70 Muppets. More Muppets, please. A Muppet fan podcast presented by ToughPigs.com. This is the podcast where we celebrate the Muppets' 70th anniversary with a series of spotlights on our favorite Muppet characters, from fan favorites to the most obscure. I'm this week's host, Ryan Rowe, and the Muppet of the week is Bill the Bubble Guy. Performed by Dave Goelz and designed by Matt Brooks, making his world debut in 1996 on Muppets Tonight. Also worth noting, on Matt Brooks' website, he notes that special effects and prop master Fred Buckholtz supplied the bubbles. And yeah, he's Bill. Bubbles come out of his head. Now, when I tuned into Muppets Tonight as a teenage Muppet fan, I was delighted by Bill the Bubble Guy. Here's another cool new Muppet character. Although, as he continued to make appearances on the show, I wondered, why is it always Bubbles? Does it have to be Bubbles? Could something else come out of his head for once? Like jelly beans, or pennies, or confetti? Of course, now I realize that it probably would have required a lot of time and effort and money to reformat the Bill puppet every week, just so he could dispense something new for my amusement. And it didn't really matter. I liked him anyway. I was just happy to be watching a new Muppet TV show, for as long as that lasted. About that show, Muppets Tonight was the Muppets returning to the variety show format, but they made an effort to make it clear that this was a very modern, very hip, very 90s version of a Muppet comedy variety show. But here's a thought. Is Bill the Bubble Guy secretly the most significant link between Muppets Tonight and variety entertainment from days gone by, from the past? Well, probably not. But pour yourself a glass of your favorite bubbly beverage and humor me for a moment. Okay, have you heard of Lawrence Welk? He was a band leader who hosted a variety show called, well, The Lawrence Welk Show, which ran more or less continuously on television from 1951 to 1982. You could ask your grandparents about it, or your great-grandparents. Lawrence Welk co-wrote a song called Bubbles in the Wine that served as the opening theme song for the first few seasons of his show. And as the title, The Lawrence Welk Show, appeared on screen, what else do you suppose was seen on screen floating around the studio? That's right, bubbles. By the way, I hope this information is still up to date, but the website Roadside America tells us that Lawrence Welk's original bubble machine is on display at the William Penn Hotel in Pittsburgh. When you see the picture, it's pretty ingenious. It's just kind of like a bunch of bubble wands attached to a rotating wheel thingamabob on a motor in front of a fan. So every time it rotates, like, there's always a bubble wand in front of the fan. So there's always bubbles constantly being blown out of the fan in front of it's really cool. You should take a look. And if you're ever in Pittsburgh, go look for it. I've never actually seen a complete episode of The Lawrence Welk Show. I'm actually most familiar with it from Stan Freberg's parody of it. Based on what I know about the listenership of this podcast, I'm guessing there are a few other people who would also say the same. I'm also pretty sure that most people today would find the Lawrence Welk Show boring. Or perhaps old-fashioned would be a more polite way to say that. But isn't Bill the Bubble Guy kind of boring? And that's not meant to be an insult. I love Bill the Bubble Guy. But isn't that what makes him funny? He's not a wacky character in an outrageous costume like New Zealand or Marvin Suggs. He's just a man wearing an old-fashioned plaid jacket, a bow tie, glasses, and Dave Goelz makes this perfect choice to play him as this kind of laid-back regular guy, but bubbles come out of his head, and that makes him extraordinary. The Lawrence Welk Show somehow managed to stay on the air in a changing television landscape for 31 years, I haven't even mentioned yet that ABC canceled it and it continued for another decade in syndication. And that's pretty extraordinary too. And what else do they have in common? Bubbles. Now let's go back even further to vaudeville. Or vaudeville, but I like when they say vaudeville. So on the website History of Bubbles, I found out about a husband and wife duo billed as Hap Handy and Company, who performed on stage in the early 20th century with an act in which Mr. Handy would make Bubbles run up and down a stick and dance around a tightrope. And reportedly he would cut them in half and put them back together. I would like to see this act. Also in the same time period, there was another husband and wife act called Ollie Young and April, which I read about on the website juggle.org. By the way, you should check out both of these websites, juggle.org and History of Bubbles. Ollie Young was an accomplished juggler already, and well known for his juggling act before he introduced Bubbles into his act with his wife. And yes, they juggled Bubbles. And yes, I successfully said juggled Bubbles on my first attempt recording this without having to do another take of me saying juggled Bubbles. The website quotes a review from the time, quote, "They roll and bounce them all over the stage as though the bubbles were made out of rubber." You know, Muppets Tonight got canceled after only 2 seasons. It's possible Bill was just getting started. We saw him blow as many as 12 connected bubbles at once. You know, he could do 2, he could do 5, he could do 12. But who knows what kinds of tricks he could have perfected if the show had just stayed on the air for more seasons. I'm also thinking it was a missed opportunity to have Pierce Brosnan do a juggling act on the show with Andy and Randy and not even try to have him juggle Bill's bubbles. But now let's go even further back. I learned from the website PHX Square that in the 1880s, newspapers in Great Britain reported on soap bubble parties. These were events where folks would get together, fill bowls with warm bubble solution, and distribute clay pipes decorated with ribbons to dip in the bubble solution, and hand fans to blow the bubbles around. Sometimes children attended these parties, but sometimes they were just for adults. That's right, it was all ages entertainment that worked on multiple levels. Just think, every scene that Bill the Bubble Guy appeared in was, in its own way, reviving the 100-year-old tradition of the soap bubble party. Especially that sketch in the Sandra Bullock episode, While You Were Slapping. That sketch has a lot of characters blowing bubbles in it. You know the one. It's a parody of Sandra Bullock's movie While You Were Sleeping. She meets Bill's whole Muppet family in his hospital room while he's in a coma, and bubbles are coming out of all their heads, and she slaps them all, and I think maybe they slap her. Isn't it weird that was only Bill's second appearance on the show? They could have done While You Were Slapping with any other Muppet, a more recognizable Muppet, or just a random whatnot. And the joke that Sandra Bullock is slapping his family members still would have worked. It still could have been While You Were Slapping, but they cast Bill the Bubble Guy as the guy in a coma and added this extra weird layer of everybody blowing bubbles. So the audience would have to know that he's a bubble guy and all his family members are bubble people based on one previous appearance on the show that the audience might have missed. I mean, they could have picked it up from the dialogue in the sketch, but I have to wonder, did anyone miss the Garth Brooks episode where he debuted and then tune in for the Sandra Bullock episode months later and think, wait, what? Did Bill Pullman blow bubbles and While You Were Sleeping? Oh. Maybe it's because it was Bill Pullman starring with Sandra Bullock in that real movie, And Bill the Bubble guy's name is Bill. Huh. Anyway, let's move back to the present. Bubble entertainment in the 21st century. There is an off-Broadway show in New York City called Gazillion Bubble Show. A story on Playbill.com describes the show as a combination of bubble artistry, lasers, lights, music, and interactive theatrical magic. So we're talking about combining so many different forms of variety entertainment, but you gotta have bubbles in there. As I record this, sadly, it's scheduled to close in September of 2026 after a 19-year run, though. 19 years. For almost 2 whole decades. Tourists visiting New York from all over the world have come to see a show where the point is basically, hey, look, bubbles are cool. Now, when the creators of Muppets Tonight came up with Bill, do you think they knew they were tapping into this primal human desire to be entertained by bubbles? I don't know. And even though Gazillion Bubble Show is closing off-Broadway, it's not ending. The producers are planning a tour, so the bubbles will keep going. It reminds me of the moment in the previously mentioned Garth Brooks episode of Muppets Tonight, when a network executive breaks the news to Bill the Bubble Guy that despite an earlier promise, he won't be taking over the show's time slot after all. But Bill is not bothered by it. He's happy to just keep blowing bubbles. Or in the Andie MacDowell episode, when Andie MacDowell asks Bill if he works there, and he says, if you call this work, and then he shows her how he can blow bubbles. All he wants to do is entertain people, amuse people by blowing bubbles. He's just happy to keep blowing bubbles. The show must go on. The bubbles must be bubbled. He's Bill. Bubbles come out of his head, but show business is in his heart.
70 Years, 70 Muppets, More Muppets Please is a Muppet fan podcast presented by ToughPigs.com. Hosted by a myriad of people and edited by them as well. Produced by Joe Hennis. The Muppets 70 logo is used with permission by the Muppet Studio, with thanks to Danny Iglesias, Frank Reifschneider, and Lee Slaughter. Don't forget to follow ToughPigs.com on all social media platforms, and you can support us by heading to patreon.com/ToughPigs or by buying merchandise at tpublic.com/ToughPigs.